Ultimately, God was leading me into this year so that I could have a hard reset. Reality starts setting in, and by the end of February, I was miserable. And I was like, what have I done? That leads up to September the 8th of 2011. She said, Adam, I think you have a theme in your life of I don't want to be like him. And the moment she said this, my jaw just hit the floor. That for me was the moment that I finally felt free to be a pastor. If it wasn't for that conversation, who knows where I'd be.
Welcome back to A Hard Reset. Grateful that you're here watching. We're kind of closing out season 1. And as we approach that, I thought it would be really cool to have a good friend of mine named Adam, who also doubles as my pastor of my church. But we have become friends not only because of the mutual friends, but also because of golf.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Johnson.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Adam,
Excited to be here.
yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. So, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thank you.
I have to ask you this question as a pastor, especially, like, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Pet peeve. I would say it's when people are not considerate. And that plays out in a lot of different ways.
Shopping
but
carts.
when people, if people blow past you in a store as if you are literally just a shelf holding items, and they, they don't, or on the road, or if you're waiting in line, or if you're holding a door and people just walk by and they don't even treat you or acknowledge you as a human. That's one of the things that really, really gets under my skin.
So you don't spend a lot of time in Manhattan?
No, the times I've been there, just the couple times I've been there, I definitely notice it does not feel like the South. So
I was with a buddy of mine. Manners is like a huge thing in respect,
yeah.
right? And we were there at lunch, and we were at Roosters, right, in downtown Cumming. Have you had their wings and blue cheese?
Oh yeah.
But the table behind me, the very sweet waitress, you could tell like maybe 2 or 3 weeks in on being a server, and she was like, "Hey, my name's Krista. Thank you so much for being here. What can I get you to drink?" And he goes, "Miller Lite, Coors Light." Like, no, please, no, thank you. Just like was rude. And
It's like a computer. You're just inputting information and sending it over.
That resonates very well with me. I wanted to ask this question because obviously I know your storied career as a superstar athlete for the University of Georgia.
Go Dogs.
Shout out to the Dogs and Chris Davis, who we know mutually, who also is he has a storied career at the University of Georgia. But like, tell people growing up, what did you think your life was going to look like?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't know. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and so I was the baby of the family, and I experienced that full on. So I feel like I did a lot of my growing later on in life, and I was. Some would say I was spoiled, but I don't think I was spoiled. I just think the timing was better for me with the way things worked out in my family of origin. But I grew up youngest of 3 kids. My dad was actually a Southern Baptist preacher.
No way.
And when I was 5 years old, unfortunately, my parents divorced, and my dad had to leave the church he was at. He went and started another church in downtown Lawrenceville. And so I lived with my mom, and I saw my dad every other weekend. And that was a huge, shaping event for me as a kid. And so as I continued to grow up, football was a big part of my life. And once I hit high school is when my faith really started to take off. And I had learned how to play guitar, and was at this time, this was mid 90s. It was when contemporary worship music was just getting started. Nowadays, there's all sorts of incredible music out there. Back then, not so much.
Which was Michael W. Smith?
Michael W. Smith. Hillsong had just gotten their start. Passion just got their start with Charlie Hall and some of the early days, some of the artists that they had in the early days. Petra Praise was another one that was really popular back then. Newsboys.
Newsboys for sure.
So I had started going to some worship services on Wednesday night with a buddy of mine, and they had a band, like a contemporary worship band. Now that you see everywhere now, but back then it was a new thing. And so I would watch the guy leading on stage. There was something in me that just really resonated with the music. So I would watch him leading on stage and I would pick out the chords. Okay, that's a G, that's a C, that's a D. And then I would go home and grab my guitar and just kind of figure out the song by ear. I didn't know how to read music, but I knew, some different chords on the guitar. And once I learned a song, I would just sit in my room and I'd play it for like an hour at a time. I just play it over and over and over again. And began to connect with God in a personal way through that. And then over the next few months, right at the beginning of high school, started leading worship at a youth group over near Stone Mountain. And,
which church?
It's called Smoke Rise Baptist Church.
Okay.
And they had a youth gathering on Sunday nights called Life. And I'm sure Life stood for something, but I can't remember what it stands for now. But I remember their music director for like their adult service. So, I mean, this guy's in a suit, tie, the whole deal, very buttoned up. Not necessarily going to relate to, the youth of the day, but he would show up to Life and he would bring a boombox and he would put a tape in, cassette tape, that'll bring you back a little bit, but a cassette tape in of, some sort of attempted contemporary music, and he would hit play on the boombox. And as I'm there with a couple of my friends, I thought, well, I could play that on guitar.
Sure.
Like, so would we rather have live music here? And so one of my friends who's, he's a hard charger. He's a red temperament. He kind of took charge of the situation. He was like, I'm going to go talk to the music guy. And so he went to him. And sure enough, the next Sunday night, I was up there playing guitar and kind of leading and singing in front of the youth group there at Smoke Rise. And what ended up happening was over the next couple months, after I would play, somebody would come up to me and they'd say, hey, well, I know how to play drums. Maybe I could play with you, or I know how to play keys, or I know how to play bass. And over a month or two, we formed a band and started leading worship as a full-blown band, and had a name. Our name was Reborn. And so we led worship all around the Southeast, and it kind of took off in high school. So,
wow. So y'all traveled around.
Yeah.
This is like Andy Thompson's story.
Has he been on this podcast?
He has.
Okay,
he
there
has.
You go. Yeah, so Andy and I definitely relate on the music scene. His band was much more successful and much more talented than ours was.
I don't know. I've heard rumors how good of a singer you are.
Well, thank you for saying that. We were not the most talented, but again, back then there were not a lot of bands doing contemporary worship music, and so we started out just at Smoke Rise doing a youth praise service once a month on Sundays. And that began to grow, and then word began to spread. So we started playing for college groups and youth groups.
No way.
Really all around. And over the years, it kind of grew. And we put a CD out one of those years, and we recorded it in our friend's basement. It's one of the worst recordings in the history of all of the music industry, I think.
I doubt that.
But nonetheless, we recorded it and had a lot of fun with that. But that was when my faith really began to take off, because I saw God use us with our limited talents to impact people and to change their lives and to see them come alive in their relationship with Jesus. So as I looked forward in life of, hey, what do I want to do for my career? Ministry was definitely one of them. Really? One of the things at the top of the list. It was like, hey, if I can do something, not even necessarily music, but if I could do something to help people connect with Jesus and make their faith come alive and still pay the bills and keep the lights on at home, that's what I want to do.
Can you imagine what like Forrest Frank and like Brandon Lake are doing now that they're like selling out, like they're making pop radio and then they're selling out these. I haven't been to either one of their concerts. We've looked into it. And I think Brandon Lake's coming here, but just imagine like just the worship experience at Gwinnett Arena or things like that.
It's incredible to watch. And I love how some of those guys, especially, they seem to have maintained their humility, even though they're superstars.
Yeah.
I heard somebody was telling me the other day that Forrest Frank, even when he's in his concerts and people are kind of screaming and freaking out about him, he in the moment will be like, no, this is not about me. This is all... this is all about God. So even that's really, really cool.
Yeah. Where's your favorite place you played back then?
Probably the beach retreats. We did a bunch of beach retreats for high schoolers. There was something about being away and, having, rather than just doing maybe a worship service on a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening in the midst of their life, they're still kind of connected to life, but there's something about getting away. And so when you're away for 4 or 5 days and then you're at the beach on top of that, it's just it's a beautiful combination of nature and beauty, and then being able to kind of disconnect from normal life and connect with your Heavenly Father. So
I love that. Do you have a favorite song right now that's out?
yeah, that's a good question. I love a lot of music. I would say SEU Worship is the band that I'm tracking with the most.
Yeah.
They seem to have really taken off in the last year or two. A lot of the songs that we're playing with our middle school environment, our high school environment, are SEU worship songs. So Monday Morning Faith is one of the ones that's super popular over the last year or so. But they just came out with a song. I'm trying to think of the title of it. A Forgiving God. I think the title of it is A Forgiving God, but it basically is the prodigal son story in a song. And some of the words and the music that they've put around it is just beautiful. I'm just listening to it over and over again.
Yeah. Music, no shade on the pastors, but like music just speaks to me in ways that, I just feel the closest to God, and it is just amazing. I just love it so much. So I, again, resonate with that. So the premise of the podcast is hard reset, right? Where we talk about like big moments in our life where we're like, I can't do this anymore, and I need to abandon the old and embrace this new kind of thing. Do you have a moment that happened with you in your life where you just had to hit the reset button and start over?
First off, I just want to say I love this idea. When you shared this with me and talked about the idea around it, I think it's so important to be a student of our own lives, and especially to pay attention to the big moments where God seems to be up to something in a really specific way. So, thanks for inviting me to be a part of it. The thing that comes to mind to me is September the 8th of 2011. 2011 was the year of my first really big hard reset, I would say.
Yeah.
And the language that I put around it is it's not necessarily a year I would want to live again, but it's also not a year. It's also a year that I couldn't live without because of the impact and the change in my life. So, one of the things I was thinking about just in this idea of this podcast and hard reset is it's interesting that the word hard is in there because it is often difficult, right? Typically we don't get the reset without the difficulty, but in retrospect, years down the road, maybe 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we look back on it and we see it as a beautiful reset. Yeah. It's not just hard. It doesn't take away the difficulty, but we can look back on it and go, gosh, what a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful for it, even though it was really, really hard to go through. So going back to, you want me to share about it? Is it okay?
That would be great.
Going back to that kind of thought in my heart in high school of, I think I want to be in ministry. I love ministry. What played out over the years to come was actually, it sounds like it would be really clear, like the path was laid out in front of me, but it was not that clear and it was not that simple and not that easy. So went to the University of Georgia and was involved in some campus ministries there, got a degree from the Terry College of Business, graduated in 2004.
Are you Mark Rick?
Yep.
Okay.
I was there with Coach Rick. His first 3 years, was on the football team there, had an incredible experience. He's an incredible man, and I really was honored to get to play with and for him. So I graduate college, and if you looked at my resume the first 5 to 6 years out of college, what you would see is me bouncing back and forth between some sort of ministry job or something connected to ministry, and then over to something that would be more corporate or, in kind of the public space. And so I interned for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for a year. And then I worked for a corporate events company, emceeing and producing corporate events all around the country. And then I went to a leadership training program up in upstate New York for a semester where we took seminary type classes and did outreach in the community. And then when I left that, I went into sales, surgical device sales. So I was in the operating room every day, talking to doctors, talking to OR directors, and
that's wild to me that
product.
You guys don't have medical degrees, but like you're in the operating room. I'm like,
it was scary. Honestly, I wasn't even hired yet, and I went on a ride along, and I had to wear scrubs. They got me some scrubs to put on, and the guy who was an official rep, he was a employee of this company. he brings me with him into the operating room, and he just tells me, hey, don't touch anything that's blue, anything that's draped in blue. That's the sterile field. You can't touch it. That was the only instruction I got before going into
what was the surgery?
This room. That's a good question. I think it was a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, which is lap chole for short, which is basically when someone has their gallbladder taken out.
Okay.
So I saw plenty of those in my career, but it took me in, and there I am watching a surgery happen. And have no.
And you're telling the
training.
doctors what to do.
That's right.
Which is unbelievable.
That's right. It was pretty wild. So I started working, doing sales. I was doing sales for a couple years, and all of these transitions, there's a longer story that's involved with them. But at this point, my wife and I had just gotten married. She was on staff at North Point Community Church. I connected with some of the pastors on staff and become friends with them, and they knew, okay, Adam's got a heart for ministry and may want to be in ministry long-term, not just be in sales for his career. And so they began kind of floating different opportunities past me in 2007. Hey, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in this? And in 2008, they came to me and said, hey, we'd love for you to be the singles director at Brownsbridge Church. And Brownsbridge had only been open for about a year at that point. And we prayed through it. Me and Kelly prayed through it, ended up deciding that we felt like God was leading us to be a part of what God was doing through the community at Brownsbridge. Yeah. And so made the move in June of 2008 and was there for about 2 years before I started exploring opportunities back in the corporate space, specifically back in sales. And by December of 2010, I had accepted a job selling surgical equipment again.
Is that because of, you don't have to answer these questions,
Sure.
but is that because of the money? Is that because of you didn't feel calling? Is it the leadership?
So there was a number of different things I think that contributed to this. And I'll share more of this in just a few minutes. This is kind of what gets into my hard reset. But if you had asked me in 2010, I would have told you, well, I think there's some development things that need to happen in me. I think I need to face some things in the corporate world. I've still got some questions that I didn't get answered, in 2006 to 2008 when I was doing this before. There was a financial component for sure. Our twin sons were born in December of 2009. So I think that just kind of elevated the financial piece. And selling surgical equipment is, you're commission based. You can make a lot of money in that industry. Oh, yeah. And so of course it's much different than being in ministry. So there was a handful of different things. And I prayed about it a ton. I had processed with a lot of people and really felt like God was leading me to make this change. In retrospect, he was leading me to make the change, but just for far different reasons than what I thought. I thought I was going to be the number one salesman in the company, and I was going to have this workplace ministry where I had the opportunity. There's a lot of people that need Jesus in this space. So I thought, I'm just going to have this influence and connections and relationships that I'm going to be able to use to help encourage people to Jesus. That's what I thought I was being led into this for, but ultimately God was leading me into this year so that I could have a hard reset. And I didn't have that language at the time, but I'm borrowing that language from you. He was leading it. A mentor of mine would call it a crushing. He said that all men and women will go through a crushing at some point in their life. And it's when you're in a season where you feel like you've got more on your shoulders than you can possibly bear. And through that season, God does something special and you come out the other side really with new life, with resurrection after the death that comes through a crushing like that. So I make the transition in December of 2010. The first couple months are just a honeymoon period. I'm driving around. I'm like, this is great. This is awesome. I'm, connecting with different staff at hospitals and facilities that we worked with. And then we had our national sales meeting in January of 2011, which because I was a brand new rep, I got invited into it, even though I had not sold anything yet. I had just come on board. But they were hosting it at the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna Niguel, California.
Wow.
And it's a spectacular
take
property. No, I wasn't able to take Kelly, unfortunately. So I'm like 6 weeks into the job and they fly me out and we stay at the Ritz-Carlton for 3 or 4 days and we have all these meetings and the food's incredible and the view of that property is unbelievable. And it was just, I was cloud nine. I was like, this is incredible. This is going to be great. I come home and within a week or two, reality sets in, like, oh, I actually have to go sell something. Like I actually need to get some POs in order to make my number this year. And reality starts setting in. And by the end of February, I was miserable. And I was like, what have I done? I don't like this. And there were several things that contributed to that. Had a product that was really difficult to sell. And the week that I started in the job, a big paper came out from the Cleveland Clinic essentially saying that our product didn't work. Our product was a little bit of a new technology. And so new technology really rises and falls on white papers, which are big research projects that someone will do. And then it'll get signed off on by peer reviews by other doctors. And so a white paper came out literally the week that I started that said the product didn't work. So I was having to overcome that when I came into the facilities.
That's a huge objection to overcome.
Huge objection. The product was very expensive and didn't really replace anything in the OR. And so it was a difficult sell. So that was a piece of it. But also, I think for me, there was this calling in me of ministry, and I had kind of walked away from that. I didn't know it at the time. I wouldn't have put that language around it at the time. But to me, I was determined. I was like, I'm going to make this successful. I feel like God's led me here. So I put my head down and just kept doing the best I could do every single week. And in every month that year of 2011, every month got worse, got more and more challenging. And
are you a commissioned?
Yes, there's commission, but thankfully with this product, there was a base.
Okay.
And so it wasn't like I was, scraping by.
Yeah.
I at least had an income coming in. But it was really hard to see a future too. It was like, how do I sustain this job for years to come, especially if I dislike it this much? It's not fulfilling. It's not fueling me. So every month got more and more challenging, but I just kept my head down, kept working harder and harder. By the end of this summer, I had been tracking with several people that were on staff at North Point and Brownsbridge, and they kind of knew how things were going. And by the end of summer, they started approaching me like, hey, are you ready to come back yet? And for me, I really felt like I can't come back yet. I feel like I need to, I feel like God led me to this 6 months ago, and I need to see this out. And then conversations continued over the next couple months. And I began to think to myself, if I'm going to go back into ministry, I think there's some things I need to get figured out, specifically with a counselor, before I make this move again. And I'd never worked with a counselor or a therapist in my life up until that point. I had several friends that had worked with this one therapist named Denise, and they would relay conversations to me, things they were learning through their sessions with her. And every time I heard it, this was about 4 or 5 years before 2011, I would hear them process. And my thought was, I probably need to have some of those conversations, just thinking back to my family of origin and parents being divorced and things along those lines. And so in August of 2011, I decided I'm going to start a journey with a counselor, and I'm going to try to get in touch with Denise. So I had someone connect me with her, and she lived in New Jersey. And this was before Zoom and before this was a really common thing. Virtual health now is a very common thing, but back then it was not. And so I get a phone call set up with her, and we had our first session in August of 2011. And she said, tell me your story on our first call. And what I heard was, tell me what's going on, and tell me the whatever you're struggling with, what you want to get fixed. Because again, I'm calling her to get some things fixed. So I kind of went through my story really, really quickly, the early years. I said, I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, and parents divorced. And I kind of flew through all of that and got to college and career, because after all, I thought that's why we were on the call, right? That's the presenting problem. And I got to the end of that story and into my story to modern day. And she said, wow, Adam, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so sorry to hear that your parents divorced. And that your dad left, and that you grew up in a single parent home. And up until that point in my life, no one had ever said that to me. And so I was like, oh, wow. Like I kind of was caught off guard, and I was like, well, thank you. And she said, what did it feel like as you shared that with me? And the truth was, I didn't really feel anything, because I had shared that story so many times in small groups or, men's groups in college or Bible studies when we'd share our testimony. But I was talking to a counselor, and so I knew I needed to say something. So I was like, well, it's heartbreaking. And she says, that's an interesting term. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, heartbreaking is a very distant term. That's a term that we would use to describe something we're seeing on the news or something that's happening, down the street, or maybe, kids starving in another country. It's not a term we would use to describe something we are personally feeling. And so in my very first call with my counselor, I was totally busted, called out. And so I told her, I said, hey, the truth is I didn't really feel anything. I've shared that story so many times. It kind of is what it is.
Sure.
And she said, Adam, when we process our story in a healthy way, it brings up healthy emotion, even years or decades later. And she ended up sharing a little bit about her own story with me and how she's like, hey, every time I share that story, it brings up healthy emotion. And so that was our very first call together. Over the next few calls, she helped me begin to peel back the layers of the onion on my story and some of the things that I really wasn't connected with. And then that leads up to September the 8th of 2011, which was when I had my hard reset. I was driving to an offsite for our sales team from the Southeast. We were going to meet up at Lake Kiowee for a few days and do some planning for the upcoming quarter. And with Denise, her one request was always that you wouldn't be driving when you take a call with her. She's like, hey, if you're in your car, that's fine. I just want you to be parked, because she was often, we were digging into some pretty emotional stuff, and she wanted us to be focused on that, not focused on the road. And so I'm timing out my drive up to Lake Kiowee and was thinking, okay, I've got to be there by this time. So I need to get about halfway up. So I drove up and I exited exit 1 in South Carolina. It takes you to Seneca, South Carolina. So I get off at exit 1 and I'm winding my way up on backcountry roads, and I pull over at a random gas station in the middle of nowhere in just outside of Seneca, South Carolina. And I jump on the phone with Denise, and at the intro of our call, we're kind of jumping back in, and she said, hey, Adam, I'm curious, if you're already considering going back into ministry at this point, why did you leave ministry 9 months ago? And this goes back to your question a few minutes ago of, hey, what prompted you to leave? And I shared with her what I shared with just about everybody in 2010 and 2011. I said, I just feel like some things need to be developed and grown in me. I think I need to face some things back in the sales world. And, there was a financial piece, and she's kind of listening as I share all these things. And she said, I finished talking, and she said, Adam, I think you have a theme in your life of, I don't want to be like him. Talking about your dad. And if you're not careful, that theme can become an undercurrent that informs decisions in every area of your life.
Oh, wow.
And in 2010, you got to a place where you needed a job change. That's totally normal. Everybody gets there. But then as you began to look at the various options, you looked at ministry, and you looked at your dad, and you said, you know what, my dad was in ministry and I really don't want to be like him. So I've got to get into some other line of work altogether. And the moment she said this, my jaw just hit the floor. My
whole body has goosebumps thinking about the weight of that and hearing that.
It was so surreal to have something stated that you knew in the moment was so true, like so true, but I'd never consciously thought that before that moment. Until she put that language on it, that was under the surface the entire time, truly, as she said, informing decisions in every area of my life, and I never knew it. So I just sat there with literally with my jaw to the floor going, oh my goodness, that is so true. And in that moment, I could only see 2010. I could only see a year before. And I knew that is exactly what happened in 2010. As we continued to process over the next couple months, I began to see how that was informing decisions even back in high school when I would lead worship or I would speak at a youth group event, people would come up to me afterwards and they're like, "Oh, that was great. Hey, like, do you think you want to be a pastor one day?" And my response to them in high school, again, I connected the dots on this later, but I would tell people, I'd say, "Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. But IBM needs pastors too."
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
And that's true. IBM does need pastors too,
100%,
right?
yeah.
The public space needs people that care and care about and are following Jesus, right? And are helping be salt and light. But 2011 helped me see that for me, that was me pushing back against full-time ministry. Even though I wanted it, and even though other people saw it in me, I fought it because I didn't want to be like my dad. But I didn't know it, right? And then obviously I talked about my resume earlier, but if you looked at my resume from 2004 to 2011, it literally was ministry, corporate, ministry, corporate, ministry, corporate. And the moment Denise shared that with me, put those words around it, something was unlocked for me. It truly was a hard reset. That for me was the moment that I finally felt free to be a pastor. I finally felt free to be a pastor. And it still was several more months before I came back on staff. It was about 6 months later, I came back on staff at North Point as a married groups director, working with our leaders of our small groups for married couples. And then I've had a variety of roles since then, and ultimately led back up to Brownsbridge to be the lead pastor there for the last 8.5 years. But if it wasn't for that conversation, who knows where I'd be.
Is Denise still out working in the world?
She is. I have, I sort of had like a side goal after she helped change my life to get as many people as possible working with Denise through the years. And there's seasons where she has openings and takes more people on. And then there's seasons where she's full and she's like, "Hey, I can't, I don't have any more space." But she was a professor at Nyack College in New York City for many years. But Nyack shut their doors a couple years ago. So she went back into full-time practice just a couple years ago, but would highly recommend her.
Do you still meet with her on occasion?
Occasionally, yeah. Especially it's been, I would say for the last 14 years, I'll be on for maybe a year to 18 months, and then I'll be off for about a year to 18 months. And typically there's kind of an ebb and flow in life. I feel like through that season, I realized all of us need counseling at some point in our life. Yep. And really, we're never fully done growing. We're never fully done healing. And there's an ebb and flow to life. Like, we'll never fully be outgrowing that need in our life. We'll bump into something, could be fine for several years, but then we bump into something and go, okay, you know what? I need someone to help me kind of sift through this and dig a little bit deeper on, why did I feel that way? Or why did I respond that way? Or why did that rise up in me? So
maybe not for you, but definitely for me. My Denise, his name is Ed.
Okay.
And Tracy has just this beautiful way of saying, like, "Hey, maybe you should talk to Ed about this." Does
Tracy
Kelly do that?
A wise woman. Yes. And Kelly's very close with Denise. Kelly's worked with her as well. And they've actually developed a really good friendship through the years. And so Kelly's connected with her as well. So
why do you think as men, it's really hard for us to open up? Like, there's a guy right now that's watching this or listening to this, and he's like, "Nope, not going to therapy. Not going to address all these things that have happened in my life. I'm just going to stay here." Like, what would you say to him? And how do we find a Denise?
Yep. Two great questions. I think obviously on the surface, pride and ego is the thing, right? When you're humbled, when you're broken in life, when you're at a place where you truly have hit the bottom, I remember a guy saying, he had started taking medication and this guy was well-known speaker and author and pastor. And he ended up hitting a season of depression in his life. And he talked about how he couldn't even get off the floor. And he started taking antidepressants. He started taking medicine. And he said, I had for years preached against taking medicine. And a lot of people in the Christian circles will say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's, just trust God," or whatever. And he said, "Let me just tell you something. You would take rat poison if you knew it would make you feel better when you're that broken and when you can't get off the floor." And so I think the same thing's true with counseling, right? That's a man who's not hit rock bottom yet. Because when he hits rock bottom, he'll definitely reach out and go, "Okay, I gotta do something to fix this," right? But I think there's another piece too, is I think we as men, we are fixers. And if there's not an easy solution, we hesitate to go to it because, man, that puts us in a really vulnerable space. If we go, hey, I want to go try fix this thing, and then we can't fix it. And oftentimes they look at their stories. We look at our stories and we look at things in the past and we go, there's nothing I can do about that. It happened.
Yeah.
Like that event happened, and the past is the past. It is what it is. We say things like that. There's nothing I can do. So going and working with a counselor and drudging all this stuff up again.
I'm always going to be this
it's
way.
Just, it's just the past, the past. There's nothing to change. Well, Denise taught me that that's not entirely true. Yes, there are parts of what happened that you cannot change. But that's just the external story. There's the external story of the things that were said or the abuse that happened or the fight that happened or the falling out, or that's the external side of the story. There's also an internal side of the story. There's two halves of the story of the thing that happened to you in 2014 or in 2008 or when you were a kid. And the internal story is the false beliefs that you took on in that moment. It's the vows that you made when that thing happened. It's the hurt emotionally that you took on and that you still carry the wounds from. The inside of the story actually can be healed and can be changed. You can't change the external story. You can go back and change the internal story. And the amount of freedom you experience today through going back and working on the internal story,
so good.
Worth millions of dollars. It's worth whatever it costs you. And so that's what I would say to the men out there is going, hey, you may think that you can't change this, and you can't change what happened to you or what you said or what they said, but you can change the internal side of the story.
How it impacts you. Yeah, so good. I mean, I've had this conversation so much, and especially with people sitting in these chairs and talking through, and not everything, but a lot of thing is because of like our childhood.
Yeah.
And then I think about how I'm raising a family, right? And my daughters, and like what impacts I'm having on them, good and bad, that they're going to realize 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. It's like, God help us not mess up our kids too bad. You know, like what am I doing currently that they're going to be talking to a counselor about in 20 years? I don't know where I heard this, but someone said one time that children are really great at remembering events. They are not great at interpreting events. Which is a really bad combo for us as parents, right? Because that means they're going to remember things that were said and things that were done. They're not going to be great at interpreting those. So as a child, as a 9-year-old, 11-year-old, 13-year-old, you know, something can be a side comment from a parent or even a facial expression or a chuckle. And man, we can still to this day remember that facial expression they made. But in that moment, we interpret it in the worst possible way. We interpret it as a knock on who we are, our value, our significance, our validity. And when really it was like maybe our parents weren't even looking at us or thinking about us in that moment. So we remember it. We're really good at remembering it. We're not great at interpreting it. And that's what working with a counselor will help you do is go back and help reinterpret some of those things that happen in our childhood.
Yeah. Looking back, before you got to Seneca, right? Before you pulled over to have that conversation with Denise, is there anything you wish somebody would have said or told you to do that would have maybe started this hard reset prior to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think people were saying things, and I don't know if I had ears to hear fully until that season of my life. I was connected into Christian community, small groups, accountability partners, close men that I was journeying with. I had mentors in my life. And so I think that's the important thing, because I had built a network of people that were speaking life into me so that once I had ears to hear, the truth was there, right? What I needed to hear was there when I had ears to hear it, you know? So I think that was the important thing. And I even had breakfast today with a mentor of mine named Justin. And Justin was one of my original bosses at Brownsbridge when I came on staff in 2008. And so he's kind of journeyed with me through the last 17 years.
Wow.
And he was so good at laying breadcrumbs in front of me as I was 26 years old and still prideful and egotistical and had so much to learn in life. And he wasn't harsh with me. He didn't just tell me, hey, you need you need to quit being such a 26-year-old. You need to grow up a little bit. Or, hey, you need to go process your dad's stuff because I think it's really hanging on you. You know, he left breadcrumbs along the way as he developed a relationship with me, as he modeled counseling in his own life. And he would share with me things that he was processing and how he was learning and growing as a, you know, he would have been about 40 at this time. And he had kids in middle school and high school. And you know, I thought he was just sharing about his life, but really what he was doing was modeling for me the way, right? He was showing me, hey, this is how you be a great dad. This is how you be a great husband. You got to keep doing the inner work on yourself so that you can be as free as possible. So the best version of yourself can be brought out to your wife and kids.
Oh, so good. Have you asked him that he was intentionally leaving breadcrumbs, or do you think he was like the Holy Spirit was leaving the breadcrumbs?
I would say both. We talked about it, you know, after I went through my hard reset in 2011. You know, we obviously tracked a lot through all that. And then several years later, it's funny how this happens. Once you start experiencing the freedom, like you immediately want to turn around and start fixing other people. You got to resist that. You know, you got to notice it and resist it.
It's so hard
because it's a timing thing, right? Like I didn't have ears to hear. People were trying to help me in 2008, 2009, and I didn't have ears to hear yet. And so I go to Justin and I'm like, hey, like so-and-so and so-and-so. I'm like, I'm trying to tell him, like, you need to talk to Denise. You need to get a counselor. And I was like, what do you do? Like, how'd you get me to go to Denise? He was like, well, he goes, you really can't force anybody into the journey. All you can do is leave breadcrumbs. He was the one who came up with that statement. He was like, you know, you just imagine the breadcrumbs leading, you know, from the pantry over into, you know, and it's like you see a little mouse, like just going from one breadcrumb to the other. And it's like, they will follow the breadcrumbs when they're ready for the journey.
Is the breadcrumb, is the breadcrumb, well, I battled something and I spoke to Denise. Is speaking to Denise the breadcrumb, or like what's another one?
I think those, there can be a lot of different versions of this, but I think it's vulnerability from someone that's further down the journey, just sharing about what they've learned along the way. And then what happens is whoever they're talking to, again, when they start bumping into something in their mind, they're going, wait a second. I remember Adam talking about this when we had coffee. And maybe, hopefully, they reach out and go, hey, what was that thing that I feel like you had a season of life early on where you went through something similar. Tell me how you got through that. It's like, that is much more effective than it is sitting down with them in the moment going, hey, I can tell you what I see in your life. You're running into this wall and no matter how hard you run into it, it's not going to fall down. Yeah. You got to find a different route around it. And I've got a couple suggestions, you know, that's just not always as effective. Yeah. What's more effective is to leave the breadcrumb of going, hey, this is, you know, this is what happened in my life. And here's the freedom that came out of it. And, you know, keep that in your back pocket for one day if God leads in that direction.
It's funny. The breadcrumb moment for me was, my story has a little bit of being an alcoholic. Mainly I was an alcoholic to just handle the stress of owning a business and people owing me money and all these things. And I was having a conversation before I realized how bad of a problem I had. And it was a guy that was in the program and he was talking through, and he a lot of people call me Shep, and he was like, Shep, this wife called me because she knows that I am in the program now and I stopped drinking. She called me and she's like, hey, you need to have a conversation with my husband. And he was like, listen, Pam, it doesn't matter if I have the conversation with him. He has to be able to look himself in the mirror and then see, now I see all these breadcrumbs that you're saying to determine that like he needed help, not just with alcohol, but with drugs and porn, like all the things that are involved. And those little tiny breadcrumbs I now leave, not really knowing, but just kind of a little bit talking about my story.
Yeah, that's good.
And all of that.
That's a great example.
Now that you're on kind of this other side, you know, fast forward 14 years later, right? What's your life been like?
Well, it's the biggest thing is I stayed in ministry the last 14 years. If you looked at my resume, I had different roles the last 14 years, but they've all been in ministry. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that came out of that hard reset is I finally felt free to be a pastor. And when I came back on staff in North Point, it was a honeymoon period for years.
I mean, I would be Adam Johnson.
Myself. I could be Adam Johnson. That's a great way to put it. It's like I was able to freely wake up and go to work every morning and go, man, I get to do this. I don't feel guilty about it all. I'm not worried about where I'm going to lead or where this is going to lead, because my dad's story is his story.
Yeah.
This is my story, and so it was a really, really incredible few years. It felt like a honeymoon period. And so that was a big part of it. And also just seeing the impact that doing that exploratory work with a counselor could have, not only made me an evangelist of it to other people. It's something I've continued to leverage through the years. Again, anytime I bump into something that I feel like I'm stuck, or this keeps happening, or anytime our response to something is not in line with the event that actually happened, that should be a red flag to us. Like, okay, this happens, but yet the way I'm responding is up here. It's like something's off, and whatever it is inside of us that's driving that up.
What a powerful episode about a hard reset and a guy that's, kind of trying to find his life outside of school, right? Going back and forth to corporate America and then to ministry and back and forth. And I loved how vulnerable Adam was, and I'm grateful for his friendship, but also for just him sharing his story. And I know that it's hard sometimes when you have things that happen in your past that you don't want to talk about, that you feel that define who you are, and you can't change it. So why even talk about it? But I think through that episode, you could really feel that you aren't defined by your past. And even though that did happen to you, it shouldn't shape your future. I just love that episode. And I know if you were to email adam.johnson@brownsbridge.org, that he will reach out. He's such a great dude. Yeah, so I'm very grateful for this time that we got to spend together. And that's a wrap. If you can believe it, that was our final episode of A Hard Reset. Full season, I believe it's 20 episodes or 21, who knows how many episodes, but we're going to wrap this season. And I'm grateful for all of you that have listened and subscribed and told someone or shared this podcast with someone, because it's creating life change. Because I'm getting people that are reaching out to me, that are reaching out to the people that have been on the podcast, finding out that people are resonating with the stories, and they're also reaching out to try to better their life or better their companies. If you know of someone that might want to sit in this chair and have a good conversation, I would love to know those people. Or if you have some incredible story of someone that you're like, man, I'd love to hear, give me an opportunity to reach out to that person. Let us know who it is. You can email us info@resetroofing.com. You can subject line hard reset. If you want to be on the show, or you know someone that would really help a lot of people with their story, that would help. We've already lined up 3 people for season 2, but we are going to start rolling out some of the favorite parts of the podcast here in the coming weeks. And then, of course, if you know anyone that needs a roof or a roof replacement, we would love to be your go-to person for that by referring us. Helps us kind of continue on this passion project of trying to help one person that's battling something, or one person that needs to battle something. That's the whole premise of A Hard Reset. So I hope you've enjoyed these shows and this episode and this whole entire season, and look forward to seeing you on season 2 of Hard Reset.